Sci-fi from the 80s and 90s is packed with cinematic landmines, films that promised the future, then vanished like yesterday's tech. Some were just too weird, too smart, or too wild to fit in. But guess what? These are the stories that stick in your brain, years after the big-budget blockbusters fade. How many of these lost treasures have you actually seen? Are you ready to discover what Hollywood tried and mostly failed to bury? Stick around, because the real future is weirder than you remember. Millennium, 1983. Imagine boarding a flight and realizing the real danger isn't turbulence or hijackers, but time travelers from a dying future, quietly kidnapping passengers, one by one. That's the mind-bending premise of Millennium, a film that lands somewhere between Twilight Zone paranoia and bleak post-nuclear prophecy. Based on John Varley's Hugo-winning story, the movie opens with an airliner crash, but what the investigators uncover is straight-up science fiction sabotage. This is a movie that feels like it shouldn't exist. The budget isn't big enough to match its apocalyptic ambitions, but the sheer weirdness gives it a charm the blockbusters can't touch. Cheryl Ladd, yes, that Cheryl Ladd, plays Louise, a future agent whose mission is to kidnap doomed humans from history. Because her world is so polluted, no new babies can survive. Meanwhile, Chris Christopherson plays the burnt-out investigator who stumbles into a temporal nightmare where paradoxes aren't just a concept, they're a deadly, reality-warping threat. What sets Millennium apart isn't just the twisty plotting or grim future shock aesthetic, it's the mood. Everything is slightly off, unsettling. You get jarring flash cuts to an ash-colored underground society where people communicate with telepathic robots and obsess over not triggering a timeline-ending paradox. The plot folds in on itself so many times you'd swear Christopher Nolan took notes, but there's a beating, anxious heart underneath the B-movie trappings. Was it misunderstood? Completely. Critics roasted it for being convoluted and bleak. Audiences barely noticed it in theaters, lost somewhere between War Games and The Terminator. But if you want a time travel story that takes genuine risks, where the stakes are existential and the weirdness is relentless, Millennium delivers. It's a cult object now, a reminder that sci-fi doesn't have to be shiny or optimistic to make you sit up and pay attention. Don't sleep on it, because the future is always watching. Dreamscape, 1984. Before Christopher Nolan's Inception was even a doodle in a Hollywood notebook, there was Dreamscape, a film that took the basic question, what if you could enter another person's dreams? And turned it into a wild, genre-bending ride that mixes sci-fi, horror, and a splash of government conspiracy. Think A Nightmare on Elm Street meets The Manchurian Candidate, with a dash of 80s excess. The setup is irresistible. Psychic Alex Gardner, played by Dennis Quaid, in full roguish charm mode, is recruited for a secret government project. The goal? Use a rare ability to slip into people's dreams and, if needed, change their fate. It's pitched as cutting-edge science, but in classic 80s fashion, it doesn't take long before the program is hijacked by military types with darker ambitions. The film's villain, played by a gleefully sinister David Patrick Kelly, turns dreams into literal nightmares, weaponizing fear, trauma, and the thin line between fantasy and reality. Dreamscape is never content to play it safe. One minute you're in a heart-pounding chase through a post-apocalyptic landscape. The next, you're inside a child's nightmare, dodging a snake-headed monster that gave an entire generation of kids real nightmares. The dream logic is as surreal as it is unpredictable. And the film's effects, while definitely of their era, give the whole thing an off-kilter, otherworldly feel. But what really makes Dreamscape a forgotten gem isn't just the parade of wild ideas and unfiltered 80s creativity. It's the way the film swings for the fences. It asks big questions about trauma, government overreach, and the dangerous power of the mind, while still serving up popcorn thrills and an almost punk rock disregard for genre boundaries. You get psychic duels, Cold War paranoia, and a healthy skepticism of anyone in a lab coat or uniform. When Dreamscape dropped, it got lost in the shuffle of bigger, slicker movies. But in retrospect, it's clear. This film predicted a lot of what modern sci-fi now treats as gospel. Want a movie that gets under your skin and stays there? Don't let this one stay buried. After all, you never know what's lurking in your dreams. Enemy Mine, 1985. It starts like any classic 80s space shootout. Humanity at war with an alien race, dogfights in orbit, and enough macho posturing to fuel a dozen VHS covers. But Enemy Mine is not what it seems. Instead of endless battles, it crash lands two bitter enemies, a human pilot, Dennis Quaid, and a lizard-like Drac played by Louis Gossett Jr., unrecognizable under the incredible makeup on a bleak, deserted planet. No armies, no backup, no escape. Only each other. What follows isn't just a survival story, it's one of the strangest, most heartfelt sci-fi parables Hollywood ever took a chance on. These two adversaries, raised to hate each other, are forced to work together or die apart. You get all the classic stranded on an alien world obstacles, acid rain, mutant creatures, endless hunger, and the grim realization that the only voice you might ever hear again belongs to your enemy. But this film goes further. It dives deep into empathy, language, and cultural barriers. Quaid's snarky, stubborn Willis Davidge and Gossett's dignified, spiritual Jereba Sheegan begin with fists and insults, but slowly learn each other's language, stories, and fears. There's even a scene where they teach each other lullabies. It's not subtle, but it works, because it's honest. By the end, they're family, and the enemy is not who you expect. Enemy Mine was a notorious box office bomb, blamed a troubled production, shifting directors, and a tone Hollywood didn't know how to market. But those who found it on late-night TV or battered rental tapes never forgot it. Beneath the prosthetics and pulp, this movie asks, what if survival depended on compassion, not conquest? What if the real alien was the hatred you brought with you? Few sci-fi films have ever managed to be this weird, this earnest, and this ahead of their time. For anyone willing to look past the faded effects and embrace its big, bruised heart, Enemy Mine is unforgettable, a Cold War-era tale about the possibility of peace, wrapped in creature-feature clothing. Runaway, 1984. Take a deep breath and set your expectations to unhinged 1980s tech paranoia. Runaway is what you get when Michael Crichton, yes, that Michael Crichton, decides to direct a sci-fi thriller starring Tom Selleck, mustache and all, chasing down malfunctioning robots in a neon-lit near future. It's less Blade Runner and more Dirty Harry with killer Roombas. The plot is pure pulp, but the details are deliciously bonkers. Selleck plays Jack Ramsey, a cop whose specialty is runaways, machines built to serve humanity, but now running amok thanks to programming errors or sabotage. You're not just dealing with cute robots gone wrong. We're talking spider-bots that inject acid, drones with machine guns, and an entire city where the tech you trust most might just kill you. Enter Gene Simmons, yes, from Kiss, as the villain, Luther. Simmons brings a dead-eyed menace and plays the whole thing straight, creating a baddie whose idea of fun is hacking domestic robots to murder their owners. It's every paranoid parent's worst nightmare, turbocharged with 80s special effects and synth-heavy soundtrack. What Runaway does best is tap into the era's simmering anxiety about automation, surveillance, and the dawn of the computer age. It's cheesy, sure, but it also predicted a world where your appliances might betray you and where evil is just a few lines of code away. You'll spot echoes of Runaway everywhere, from Black Mirror to every AI gone wrong thriller since. Did critics love it? Not really. But it's got a wild, unpretentious energy that makes it a time capsule of Reagan-era fear and fun. Watch it now, and you'll realize, sometimes the most dated movies have the eeriest predictions. Runaway is a high-voltage cautionary tale that's never been more relevant or more entertaining. The Quiet Earth, 1985. Imagine waking up to find everyone on Earth has disappeared. No zombies, no aliens, just nothing. That's the eerie premise of The Quiet Earth, a haunting New Zealand gem that's part post-apocalyptic riddle, part existential fever dream. Our guide is Zach Hobson, a scientist who stumbles through empty streets, empty shops, and a silence so deep it'll get under your skin. Unlike Hollywood's noisy doomsdays, The Quiet Earth goes for quiet horror. Zach's initial excitement at the freedom of a world without consequences, looting, driving through golf courses, and strutting around in a woman's nightgown quickly crumbles into despair. He turns philosophical, then suicidal, and just when it seems he's utterly alone, he finds two other survivors, a woman and a man, both with secrets of their own. The film never gives easy answers. Was it a scientific experiment gone wrong? A cosmic accident? Divine punishment? All we know is something called the effect hit at 6:12 a.m., and reality has never been the same. The three survivors form a fragile, uneasy alliance, their loneliness and trauma clashing in strange, unpredictable ways. Power struggles, jealousy, and guilt simmer beneath the surface. What makes The Quiet Earth unforgettable isn't just its eerie premise or haunting visuals, though the shot of Zack, arms outstretched like a messiah, is iconic. It's the willingness to lean into ambiguity. The ending doesn't hand you answers. It delivers a surreal gut punch that fans still debate to this day. This isn't just a forgotten film. It's a meditation on what it means to be human when humanity is gone, with minimal effects, unforgettable mood, and a lonely protagonist who could be any of us. The Quiet Earth stands as one of sci-fi's most haunting lost classics. If you want a post-apocalypse with brains and soul, look no further. Slipstream, 1989. Welcome to a future where the world is literally shaped by the wind, a violent, endless jet stream known as the Slipstream that's carved canyons across the globe and blown civilization straight off the map. Slipstream is what happens when post-apocalyptic madness meets airborne adventure, a genre mashup so eccentric you wonder how it ever got made. Yet here it is. Mark Hamill as a ruthless bounty hunter, Bill Paxton as a charming outlaw, and a young, ethereal android running for his life. The movie opens in a devastated world where technology and nature have both run amok. There are no cities, only isolated outposts perched on cliffs and caves, all battered by the relentless winds. The law is toothless, the landscape is bizarre, and everyone survives by scavenging or hustling. When a mysterious fugitive named Byron escapes custody, he's pursued by Hamill's icy Matt Owens and Paxton's wisecracking pilot, with a reward promising to change their lives. What's most striking about Slipstream is its ambition. It tries to be everything at once, part Western, part sci-fi chase, part philosophical fable. One moment, you're dodging through wind-carved ravines in a battered glider. The next, you're grappling with questions of artificial life, freedom, and redemption. There's a scene with a cult that worships the wind, a rogues gallery of weirdos, and enough loopy world-building to fill 3 films. Did it succeed? Not commercially. Slipstream bombed in theaters, and critics were bewildered by its tonal whiplash and eccentric narrative. But for those willing to embrace its oddball charms, there's a lot to love. The stunning landscape shots, a killer synth score, and a melancholy sense of hope flickering beneath the chaos. Hamill plays completely against type, and Paxton brings his signature blue-collar charisma. Ultimately, Slipstream is a reminder that sometimes sci-fi is at its best when it refuses to play by the rules. It's a wind-blown fever dream, a cult oddity that's unlike anything else from the 80s or 90s, and that's exactly why it deserves to be rediscovered. The Hidden, 1987. You want an 80s sci-fi thriller with relentless energy, sly humor, and a premise that feels custom-built for cult status? Enter The Hidden, a wild, body-hopping alien chase that starts like a bank heist and escalates into a gleeful mashup of buddy cop antics and cosmic horror. The plot kicks off with a bang. A mild-mannered citizen suddenly goes on a violent rampage, robbing banks, gunning down cops, and joyriding in a Ferrari. When he's cornered, he dies in a hail of bullets, only for a slithery, slug-like alien to crawl out and take over its next victim. The Hidden of the title is an extraterrestrial parasite that moves from body to body, leaving chaos in its wake. Enter our odd couple heroes, gruff, no-nonsense detective Tom Beck, played by Michael Nouri, and the mysterious, awkward FBI agent Lloyd Gallagher, a perfectly weird Kyle MacLachlan. Gallagher knows more than he lets on, and for good reason, he's not entirely human. Their uneasy partnership is half action movie, half deadpan comedy, with the alien rampaging through LA and the cops always a step behind. What makes The Hidden so memorable isn't just the action, though it delivers, but the blend of genres. You get police procedural, horror, sci-fi, and sly comedy, all delivered at breakneck pace. The body-swapping villain is both horrifying and darkly funny, using its hosts to indulge every human vice, fast cars, heavy metal, and senseless violence. It's a blast of pure 80s excess, but there's real craftsmanship in how it escalates the stakes and mines humor from absurdity. Despite critical praise and a loyal fan base, The Hidden never broke into the mainstream. Maybe it was too strange, too subversive, or just too hard to classify. But if you're looking for a forgotten gem with style, attitude, and more fun than most of its peers, this is it. Just be careful. Once you start, you might not be able to stop. Moon 44, 1990. Before Roland Emmerich became Hollywood's master of disaster with blockbusters like Independence Day and The Day After Tomorrow, he cut his teeth on Moon 44, a dark, atmospheric slice of early 90s sci-fi that's as grungy as it is ambitious. Set in a future where Earth's resources are depleted and corporations wage war over mining rights on distant moons, the film feels like Aliens meets Escape from New York, only with more mullets and mood lighting. The plot centers on Michael Pere's Felix Stone, a tough, cynical investigator sent undercover to a remote mining colony on Moon 44. The mining operation is plagued by sabotage, and convicts are recruited as drone pilots, teamed with teenage navigators who control the station's vital shuttles. It's a powder keg of desperation, distrust, and greed, fueled by bad weather, bad blood, and the constant threat of violence from rival corporations. What makes Moon 44 stand out isn't just its pulpy noir setup or its claustrophobic industrial design, though those are worth the price of admission alone. It's the way Emmerich uses his limited budget to create a world that feels oppressive, dangerous, and lived in. Malcolm McDowell shows up as a sinister corporate boss, adding a touch of Shakespearean menace to the proceedings. There's action, dogfights in storm-lashed canyons, fistfights in rain-soaked corridors. But Moon 44 is more about tension than spectacle. The story digs into loyalty, corruption, and the thin line between order and chaos in a lawless outpost. The visuals, drenched in blue and green neon, are pure late 80s style, gritty, gloomy, and strangely hypnotic. Critics mostly shrugged it off at the time, and its release in the US was barely noticed. But for fans of sci-fi noir and offbeat genre experiments, Moon 44 is a mood-drenched curiosity that deserves a fresh look. It's a glimpse of Emmerich before he went mainstream, a time capsule from a darker, stranger future. Defcon IV, 1985. Sometimes the best sci-fi stories start where the world ends. Defcon IV is a Canadian cult oddity that does exactly that, opening with a small group of astronauts in orbit, helplessly watching as nuclear war devastates Earth below. When their malfunctioning space station eventually crashes, the real nightmare begins. A post-apocalyptic landscape crawling with mutants, warlords, and the kind of desperation that only the end of civilization can breed. The three surviving astronauts, Jordan, Walker, and Howe, land on a remote stretch of coast and quickly realize survival isn't about finding food, but dodging the bands of vicious, shell-shocked survivors. The New World Order is run by a deranged teen dictator, his crew of psychos, and one of the most stomach-churning rat traps in cult cinema history. What sets Defcon IV apart from the glut of Mad Max ripoffs isn't its budget, which is microscopic, but its bleak, unpredictable tone. It swings between grim horror and surreal black comedy, never letting you settle. The violence is abrupt, the humor is jet black, and nobody feels safe, not even the ostensible heroes. Beneath the grindhouse trappings, there's a real sense of dread and moral decay. The film asks, what's left of civilization when the rules are gone? Who do you trust when everyone's fighting to survive? The astronauts, trained for teamwork and reason, are constantly outmaneuvered by feral survivors and petty tyrants. There are no clear answers or happy endings, just a relentless, apocalyptic struggle. Defcon IV was released straight to video in most places, barely making a ripple. But among sci-fi fans with a taste for the weird and the raw, it's earned a place as a genuinely unnerving and imaginative ride. If you want a post-nuke thriller with more nerve than polish, it's time to take shelter with this forgotten gem. Freejack, 1992. What do you get when you blend cyberpunk dystopia, body-snatching time travel, a cast that includes Mick Jagger and Anthony Hopkins, and a wild anything-goes energy? You get Freejack, a sci-fi oddity that crashed hard at the box office, but left behind a trail of neon-lit weirdness that's begging for a second look. The year is 2009, as imagined in 1992, which means expect lots of chrome, smoke, and digital billboards. Emilio Estevez is Alex Furlong, a race car driver who, seconds before a fatal crash, is snatched from his car and pulled into the future. Why? In this corporate-ruled wasteland, the rich and powerful have run out of healthy bodies, so they hire bone-jackers to snatch people from the past, people who are about to die anyway, so who's going to miss them? Enter Mick Jagger as the world's most bemused bounty hunter, chasing Alex through a grim, gadget-heavy metropolis. Anthony Hopkins plays the sinister billionaire who wants to upload his mind into Alex's body. Throw in Rene Russo as Alex's old flame, now a high-powered executive, and you've got a plot that lurches from wild chase scenes to philosophical musings about identity, mortality, and just how far the 1% will go to live forever. Freejack is messy, yes, but also packed with ideas. The production design is gloriously over the top, with armored limos, goon squads, and a soundtrack that screams early 90s. The dialogue veers from snappy to hilariously clunky, but there's a weird sincerity underneath it all, especially in Estevez's desperate confusion and Jagger's deadpan menace. It's a world where loyalty is for sale, memories are currency, and technology offers no escape from being disposable. Why was it forgotten? It came out the same year as Terminator 2 and couldn't compete with the spectacle or polish. Critics called it noisy and incoherent, and most audiences skipped it. But now, its rough edges feel almost charming, a fever dream blend of action, paranoia, and punk energy that still packs a punch. For anyone craving a blast of retro future chaos, Freejack is worth the wild ride. The Arrival, 1996, Charlie Sheen, UFOs, global warming. The Arrival takes every alien invasion cliché and turns it inside out, serving up a paranoid, tightly wound thriller that slipped under the radar in a decade crowded with blockbusters. This isn't just another story about little green men. It's a slow-burn mystery where the biggest threat isn't from outer space, but from right under our feet. Sheen stars as Zane Zeminski, a nerdy but determined radio astronomer who stumbles on a signal that can only be alien in origin. When he tries to share his discovery, he's fired, blacklisted, and forced to chase answers on his own. That chase leads him into a global conspiracy. Alien infiltrators are already here, using secret power plants to terraform Earth's climate and make it more hospitable for themselves, all while turning up the heat on humanity. Director David Twohy crafts a tense, sweaty atmosphere, pushing Zane from shadowy observatories to the sweltering deserts of Mexico, where a journalist, Terry Polo, and a kid sidekick get pulled into the danger. There are shape-shifting aliens, assassin drones disguised as toys, and set pieces that are equal parts inventive and nerve-wracking. The movie is packed with twists, paranoia, and the kind of trust-no-one energy that defined 90s sci-fi. What really sets The Arrival apart, though, is its environmental anxiety. The aliens aren't conquering Earth with death rays. They're quietly tweaking the climate, turning the planet against us. The film's ending is bleak, hinting that humanity might never catch up to the scale of the threat. Despite positive word of mouth, The Arrival was overshadowed by bigger, flashier movies like Independence Day and Men in Black. But fans who discovered it on cable or DVD found a smart, atmospheric sci-fi with a brain and a backbone. Today, its themes feel eerily relevant, and its mix of conspiracy, thriller, and alien horror is sharper than ever. For those who like their sci-fi with a dose of dread, The Arrival is a must-see. Retroactive, 1997. Imagine you could relive the worst moment of your life, and maybe, just maybe, fix it. That's the hook behind Retroactive, a time loop thriller that's part action, part mind-bender, and all adrenaline. This is one of those "how did I miss this" movies that demands a second look, especially for fans of wild 90s sci-fi. The story kicks off with Karen, Kylie Travis, a psychologist whose car breaks down in rural Texas. She's picked up by a seemingly friendly couple, played by James Belushi and Shannon Wherry, but things spiral quickly. A domestic squabble turns to murder, and Karen is caught in the crossfire. In her desperate escape, she stumbles into a secret government lab where an eccentric scientist is experimenting with time travel. Cue a malfunction, and suddenly, Karen is catapulted a few hours into the past, with the chance to prevent everything she just witnessed. What follows is a frenetic, escalating cycle of events. Karen tries to save lives, but every change unleashes fresh chaos. The movie leans hard into butterfly effect mayhem, gunfights, car chases, betrayals, and violent outbursts, all ratcheting up as the day resets. Each loop, Karen gets more desperate and more resourceful, but the universe seems to push back harder. The tension is relentless. There's barely time to breathe, let alone plot. What makes Retroactive so compelling isn't just the high-concept hook, but its willingness to go for broke. Belushi, playing wildly against type, is equal parts charming and terrifying. The film never lets the viewer relax. Just when you think Karen's broken the cycle, a new disaster erupts. And underneath all the chaos, the movie keeps circling back to the question, can you really change fate? Or are some tragedies inevitable? Retroactive didn't make a splash on release. It was a cable TV staple, mostly ignored by critics. But now it stands out as a small-scale, big-idea sci-fi gem that combines emotional stakes with breakneck pacing. For a time travel movie that won't let you look away, this is one loop you'll actually want to repeat.